Hey, what's up? Zach here. And today I've got the New Balance Fresh Foam BB, and these are all the reasons why they work so well for Zach LaVine's game, and the reasons they may or may not work for yours. So let's get into them. Now, starting off in the uppers, they do really straddle the line between mid and high top shoe, and the uppers themselves are made of New Balance's Fitweave. Now, Fitweave is pretty interesting. It is a very, very thin outer layer woven TPU type material, and if you just scratch it with your fingernail, it does feel pretty rough and rugged. If you look at it under the microscope, I mean, it is a super tight woven upper there, and you can really feel that. They are a little bit harder to tie down where the Fitweave meets the tongue, because that Fitweave is just so much stronger than just kind of the textile layer in the tongue. And so I found, at least for me, when I was lacing these up, if I used the top eyelet here in the ankle collar, it was a really stiff feeling underfoot, even after a couple hours on court with these. It was really hard to break in the uppers of the shoe. If you look at Zach LaVine use these, he does not tie the upper eyelet, and I think that's maybe just to get a little bit more fluidity in the uppers, to be able to move a little bit better. I mean, the heel counter is super stiff. You get an internal with combined external heel counter, as well as a little bit of like kind of suede-ish reinforcement around here. You get a nice little internal pad here around Kager's triangle, give you a little compression around both sides of your Achilles tendon. I would just say the uppers of these are meant for a bigger foot. They're meant for someone that puts a ton of force into the shoe that can break them in. Someone like me who doesn't put as much force into the shoe, just doesn't wear them for as long of a time, isn't gonna be able to break them in as easily. And somebody a little bit taller with a little bit of a longer lever arm under these is gonna be able to really enjoy how light the uppers are and how light they feel, but also be able to break them in enough to make them comfortable. And if you look at the upper durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, I mean, the Dremel bites right through the toe cap guard, the drag guard here. However, it does not make an impression on the actual Fitweave. So I mean, the Fitweave itself is super strong, and that DuraGuard is actually really thick. So I'd say even dragging outside on these, I don't really see a problem with this. And on indoor courts, because the friction on here is so low, I don't really think you have a problem at all. And so for containment on the universal rating system, I gotta give them a 5 out of 5, because with how light the uppers are and how well they do contain you, even if you don't use the back eyelet, even though the comfort is a little bit of an issue, which we'll get to later, the containment is really second to none when you take into account the weight of the uppers themselves. But the one thing a little suspect about the uppers was the breathability. If you look at my breathability test, preheating, they were 71.7 degrees here at room air. Now, immediately after putting the heat gun on them, 244.7. That was a rise of 173 degrees. They cooled 90 degrees post that. They came back down to 153.8. However, of all the shoes I've tested, these have been the ones that have heated up the most. So I'd say if you are someone that really heats up a shoe, make sure you're putting some powder in there, or make sure you're putting your socks in the refrigerator, because outdoors, these are going to start to heat up a lot. And getting into the midsole teardown, this is an entire bed of Fresh Foam X. Now, Fresh Foam X has been pretty popular in the tennis space here for a year or so, since the Lav V2 has come out with Fresh Foam in it. Now, Fresh Foam X is really a wild concept. What it is it's a really like super advanced EVA, whereas the individual cells of the EVA actually have concave and convex sides, which means New Balance can then laser etch this EVA into different shaped hexagonal pods, being wider and a little bit more forgiving in certain areas, and then tighter and more dense in certain areas. That's why you see these shapes stamped into the outside here of the Fresh Foam. That's to represent the hexagonal pods on the inside. Now, they're not on the inside of the shoe, obviously. They're a little bit too small to see. That's kind of a representation on the outside, kind of how dense the heel is versus how dense the forefoot is. Now, on the Lav V2, which is their tennis shoe, it's super open and wide in the heel for really easy crash landings, but then really tight in the forefoot to give you really crazy side-to-side movement and ground feel. You don't need as much of that on a basketball court, because a lot of it is more on the y-axis versus on tennis, which is played mostly in the x-axis, mostly side-to-side. Now, that also is represented here on the lateral side of the shoe, where this Fresh Foam X is all contained here by this paneling, versus on their tennis shoes where it is not contained, because on a tennis shoe, once again, you want that foam to kind of bulge out on the sides. It almost acts as a hovercraft and keeps you more centered and stable, whereas on a basketball shoe, you want it more for its bouncing capabilities or more of its shock absorbing capabilities. So you want to kind of contain it more, so when you're going up and down on rebounds or on repeat layups or dunks, that foam doesn't expand so much that you bottom out the shoe. And looking at all that engineering on the single leg jump height test, I got 19 centimeters worth of single leg jump height, which is one of the best shoes I have tested using that particular method this year. And I really think it was because, number one, I was able to finally break in the uppers, get a little bit more fluid dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, and be able to pop up off the ground. But number two, that fresh foam, which is contained and constrained, plus that super thick shank in there, giving such a great diving board effect, it just really makes the shoe pop up off the ground, no matter if you're on the balls of your foot or trying to go up from flat foot stance. And backing that up on the bounce height test, I got 32 centimeters in the rear foot, 31.5 centimeters in the forefoot. Pretty consistent, which I was kind of suspecting because I just didn't think that that fresh foam got all that much more dense in the forefoot. And that bounce height test, it kind of confirmed it. The Fresh Foam X is pretty streamlined throughout the shoe, maybe just a little bit of difference between the rear foot and the forefoot. And so for bounce and shock absorption on the universal rating system, for bounce, I'm giving them a 4 out of 5 because you got to break in the uppers for so long before you can actually push them up off the ground really fluidly. For shock absorption, easy 5 out of 5. Fresh Foam X is really forgiving, and when it's contained and constrained like this, it's going to be a lot more durable versus in their tennis products where it's, allowed to bow out. I think probably the most polarizing part of the Fresh Foam BB, and probably the dividing line between what kind of players are going to want them and not, is the outsole tread. Now the outsole tread is pretty interesting. It's this full-length bullseye tread pattern here. It's kind of meant to mimic the Fresh Foam X here in the midsole. Now what I like about this is it's a 3 to 4 millimeter tread depth, so it really is chunky, especially for durability on an outdoor court. What I don't love about it though is how much dust it picks up. Even after just a half hour on court, these things had picked up so much dust. And I did notice the traction profile on these is very, very forgiving. It did not matter how much rubber warming I gave these. I was still sliding on these when I was trying to come to a really hard stop, or when I was just kind of doing my little sprint test, all 4 tests on those. I really didn't come to a hard stop. And even though these things squeak a lot on court, that still doesn't produce the really hard, crazy stopping power on these. Now, if you're Zach LaVine using these, you're probably not going to care so much about that, which I'll get to in the playability section. But if you are someone that really wants to make crazy hard cuts on these, this might not be the best shoe indoors. On an outdoor court, however, they are a lot better. And if you look at the speed ratio of the Fresh Foam BB, they only come in at a 2.2, which isn't the best we've seen this year. However, given the profile of the shoe, they're meant for a much bigger player, someone that can kind of bring their own speed to the table. Now, I only gave them a 3 out of 5 on the universal rating system in terms of speed, and that is mainly for their deceleration. It's hard to decelerate in these without sliding a little bit or without giving a little bit. Now, if you're on an outdoor court, especially a little more of a gritty asphalt or concrete court, these things are going to dig into that surface really well. But on an indoor court, you really got to watch out for the deceleration. And on the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds high grit sandpaper, not even a millimeter of damage on a 3 to 4 millimeter tread depth, which is really darn good, makes these a great outdoor shoe, as long as it's not super hot outside. And for durability on universal rating system, I'm giving them a 4 out of 5. The only thing that takes them down a little bit is, like I said, the upper durability, because this drag guard will wear down a little bit. However, everything else, pretty good. Now, in terms of the fit of the Fresh Foam BB, these were definitely the most streamlined New Balance shoes I've put on in a while. If you're a narrower medium foot, I think you can go true to size. And if you are a 2E foot, I think you could still go true to size on these. The entry is going to be a little bit more annoying for you for a little bit. Plus, remember, the uppers don't break in as well. So if you are somebody with a little bit of big toe joint arthritis or maybe a bunion or something like that, these uppers might annoy you a little bit. If you're somebody with heel pain, ball of foot pain, tendonitis, anything like that on the bottom of your foot though, these are one of the best shoes out there. So I'd say anything snake bitten on the bottom of your foot, tremendous. Anything on the top of your foot, get ready for a little bit of break-in. And so for comfort on the universal rating system, I went back and forth on this for longer than I should have. However, I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 5, just because anything that's underneath of you on this shoe is a 20 out of 5. Everything above you on the shoe is like a 2.5 out of 5. And with that being said, the contained Fresh Foam X plus the super thick supportive shank, easy 5 out of 5 for support. But getting into the all-important playability of the Fresh Foam BB, and the reasons why Zach LaVine is comfortable playing NBA basketball in them, is that these shoes are meant to be in the air more than they're on the ground. If you look at Zach LaVine, he spends more time in the air than he does on the ground during a game anyway. And so remember, these are meant to be able to crash land on, get right back up. These things are meant to be able to go coast to coast and then get up into the air as quick as possible and then give you as much shock absorption coming down as possible. There's just no reason on this earth that this shank has to be this thick and there has to be this much of a stack of fresh foam in a shoe, except the fact that it has to be able to withstand so many poundings from a large foot over and over and over again over the course of an NBA basketball game. I remember Zach LaVine is designated as a shooting guard or a small forward. I think he more plays the role of small forward more, you know, in terms of him doing some things on a court that really require crazy fast footwork and crazy low to the ground footwork and just a ton of traction. I just don't see him doing that as much as he does just trying to bully people to the hoop. And so if you play a similar style, you're gonna find a similar friend in these shoes. You know, your feet are not gonna get tired in these. You're also gonna get a little bit of a boost kind of going up, especially for rebounds or more tip drill type situations you might get yourself into. And in terms of jump shots, these do get up off the ground incredibly easy. And especially because, you know, for a big person shoe, you know, they are a little bit lighter than some of the other ones in their class. So if you are a bigger player or someone that likes to play very aggressively in the paint, kind of likes to get your elbows out a little bit, then I think these are a tremendous shoe to go to battle with. If you're someone that needs to race down the court, stop on a dime, and then create a really nice step back for yourself, then you might be sliding into their player a little bit. So I think you really have to know your own game to extract the most out of these. Now with that being said, if you are playing on outdoor courts, that profile does change a little bit. I think you can get the traction of some other shoes, some really grippy traction on those outdoor courts, especially on blacktop courts. But of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Fresh Foam BB. I do think they are a little bit of a polarizing shoe in terms of who's gonna want them and who's not. I love the idea of using Fresh Foam X in a basketball shoe. It does work tremendous in tennis shoes. And if you wanna see another recent release sneaker with pretty similar profile to the Fresh Foam BB, the Nike LeBron Next Gen, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next one.